Chapter 7. Prison Life in Limbo. Last night, in the wee hours, the first North Star blasted through. The lights went off, windows rattling as if coming off their hinges. The wind and the rain lashed and swept through our cell. We were all up sitting on our cots, inside the mosquito nets, fluttering with the gusts of wind like sails, in pitch darkness. Occasional streaks of lightning brought into a view of comical sight. Commodore Hassan, one of our cellmates, loudly called for the guards, as he would probably do commanding a ship caught in the storm out in the high seas. Naval tradition still lingering as his second nature. Half asleep, I heard his command, but no one answered, his shouts lost in the howling of the storm. Here, none is helped. The incarceration is one for penalizing the lawbreakers, even if an act of God calls for relief. This seasonal storm, known to descend in the afternoon hours, seemed to have chosen a different schedule. Is this an omen for a new routine, a new order, hopefully for the best? Before the storm, we saw the crows on the bell tree working overtime to secure their nests. We were all amazed at their relentless effort. Did they know that the storm was in the offing? Does nature communicate early to the weak? Do the crows have better scientific sense than our weather bureau? Can we not learn from their behavior? I'm reminded of the devastating tsunami that hit South and Southeast Asia in December 2004, when tens of thousands of lives were lost. But animals seem to have gone unscathed. According to eyewitness account, when the giant waves hit the coastline of Sri Lanka and South India, animals took safety before humans did. Elephants screamed and ran for higher ground. Dogs refused to go outdoor. Zoo animals rushed to their shelters. Animals seems to have sixth sense that we don't have. A reputed scientist has commented that the animals can sense impending danger by detecting subtle or abrupt shift in the environment. Vibration on land or water. Humans may have had these senses but lost them when they were no longer used or needed. Amnesia that came with civilization. Random thoughts cross my mind. Do animals, a crow, a duel, or a moina, a cat or a dog, speak the same language across countries? Bangladesh, India, the Middle East, Europe, or North America? If the differences are minimal, does a common language among them foster a special bond of amity? If anyone does a scientific study, he may end up discovering more peace in the animal kingdom than among Homo sapiens. Does superior intellect in man lead to higher differentiations in language, culture, creed, breeding intolerance, jealousy, conflict, and all other traits that make us inferior? Would the inmates of the jail have been better off as part of the animal kingdom? What about plants? Jagadish Chandra Bose, born in Munshiganj of Bangladesh, a polymath of outstanding talents, internationally acclaimed as one of the father of radio science, perhaps inspired by the stories about nature that he heard from his village friends in the vernacular school of Faridpur, proved over a century back in an experiment he conducted at the Royal Society in London that plants have life, and went further to say plants feel pain, understand affection, etc. Beethoven, a German composer and pianist, one of the most famous and influential composers of all time, became deaf when he was 40, but composed some of his finest work while denied of the ordinary pleasure of hearing. Avant-garde scientists that come to the conclusion that plants have language of their own, communicate with each other, and may even have some understanding of human. To be honest, back in Bonani, secretly I used to talk with plants on the rooftop garden, compliment them when the flowers blossomed, and regularly wished them good night. Interestingly, my father-in-law, Polli Kobi Jasimuddin, bought a transistor radio back in the 1960s, a rarity then, to entertain with music the cows that he endearingly raised in the compound of his residence at Komlapur. There was an earthly reason too. The cows gave more milk. I tend to believe there could well be a common thread, an underlying unity that binds all the organic beings, a common theory that embraces us all and explains us, a unified theory of life. Scientists talk about getting close to a unified field theory combining fundamental forces and elementary particles. The next hop would be the organic world. Even someday, humans may discover an all-embracing existentialism that includes both animate and inanimate worlds, and a continuum of existence, a common ancestry, one that could well turn out to be a spiritual journey. Interesting development in the court arena. I wonder how news gets into these walled premises that are supposed to isolate its inmates from the world. First initiated as rumors, they often turn out to be facts. It would be interesting to find the pathway along which they come in. The government has one more hole to plug, the judiciary. Reportedly, it has co-opted judges of the trial courts, the special tribunals, by promising them elevation to the bench of the higher court if they toe its lines and deliver dispensations that it wants. But the High Court in Bangladesh is no easy target. In fact, it has recently ruled that one cannot be tried for allegations dating back to the past before the emergency was promulgated. No retroactive application. Such allegation should be tried under then prevailing laws. That has raised alarm bells in the ruling quarters that want fast kangaroo trials, in particular, of the political leaders and convict them, making them ineligible for elected offices and thereby cast them out of political domain. The government and those who mattered behind the scene resorted to chicanery. Recently, a few judges of the High Court were invited to tea by the president, a sycophant holding their front office. They were advised by the shadowy forces to comply with the desires of the government or face consequences. The judges were astounded by this kind of threat delivered over tea at the presidential palace and realized that the invitation was merely a cover ploy to intimidate and arm twist them face to face by those who called shots to live up to their expectation of judicial dispensation or resign. The judge closed ranks and refused to attend any future presidential invitation to tea. I was elevated, observed the first institutional resistance against the forces of evil. The day of reckoning is not far away. A new role has been thrust upon me. Often I am to resolve disputes or comfort inmates. Jahangir, our new Faltu, had a row with Munna, the chief cook who held many levers of power inside the prison walls. There is an underworld network here and all inmates have to fall in line with it. Being in charge of the kitchen, Munna is one to be reckoned with by all. But Jahangir, no small-time guy, accused of many charges, including murder, which he vehemently denies, is not one to be easily cowed down. I admonished Jahangir for getting into trouble, telling him that good behavior can earn him credits when he serves his sentence. Unnerved, Jahangir has been doing his assigned chores while occasionally taking time to answer the jail bosses at what is called by case table in the veranda of Jamuna. Jahangir sought my help to avert the possibility of harsh disciplinary arrest, meaning custody within custody, and other associated punishments instigated by Munna, and bail him out. I sent word to Munna, who obediently turned up. Without getting into the details, I asked him to make peace. While Munna deliberated, I got a cigar from my stock and offered it to him as a gift. This was enough to soften him, and with a smile he left. The matter was resolved. With so many inmates to tell their stories and seeking comfort, I have to play the role of an elder, an avuncular friend, a shoulder for others to cry on. Afternoon is a time when we can mix freely within our compound. Some avail of this freedom to walk briskly to and fro, an exercise of sorts. A few will be sitting idly, all by themselves. Yet others come up to me with their stories, seeking my opinion of what awaits them. I listen attentively and try to offer answers, from God's will to making sense of the court proceedings, from destiny's random act to an eventual end of all miseries. They listen to me intently, believing that I know more than they do, oblivious of the fact that I am a victim too. They walk away, I guess with some hope. The next day, they wait upon me again, and I go over the same opinions like sermons. Days roll by. My intuitions say there are, among this crowd of people, those who deserve to be punished, and as also many who have been locked up innocently. I get confused about life, which I try to put in order every now and then. Karim, a muscular young man who could have found a job of a bouncer in a restaurant, was a clerk in the rural branch of a bank in Noshindi. He is accused of illegally taking a few hundred taka from a client. As an additional secretary in the finance ministry almost 2 decades earlier, I had done some desktop research to find out the cost of borrowing for a farmer from a rural bank. I recall adding costs relating to the travel to the bank, lost income, filling out the forms, and of course bribes termed as speed money. The incidental cost came up to be a lot more than the announced rate of interest for such loans. So here is Karim, if proven guilty, one of the perpetrators of crime in the financial sector. But what about the big guys who rob the banks in millions, in sweetheart deals, over-invoicing, and sheer diversion of bank loans for personal consumption and pleasures? These loans get classified as doubtful to bad, and the banks stand on the brink of collapse. The replenishment of the stolen money is done by the government, euphemistically termed as recapitalization, a brazen cover-up with public bonds and a favored recipe on the Bretton Woods institutions like World Bank, where the chief advisor of the caretaker government spent most of his working life. Rezaul had been talking to me about his case. He worked at Bangladesh Road Transport Authority, BRTA, as a clerk. The Anti-Corruption Task Force wanted him to give testimony against one of his senior officers. Rezaul had declined since he did not work in the license department, the target of the investigation. After some arm twisting, when Rezaul did not relent, he was arrested and sent to Rupsha. Rezaul was in high spirits, believing that once the trial ended, he would come out clean since he had nothing to do with the case. He had been going to court regularly, and the prosecution did not bring any evidence against him. No, that was not the outcome. When someone is taken into custody, punishment has to be given. Evidence is redundant. The judge pronounced his verdict, guilty and rigorous imprisonment for 5 years. Rezaul fainted in the courtroom. Today, I met a shattered Rezaul, pale and disoriented, but he has a post-trial consolation of sorts. The major who had choreographed this episode went to Rezaul's residence at Mirpur. A remorseful major asked for his wife's forgiveness for what had happened to Rezaul in court. He had hoped that, lacking any evidence, the court would acquit Rezaul of all charges. He too was shocked at the harsh verdict. There will be many more such repentance to live with. The albatross has just come visiting and will wind itself around the neck. I have to make sure that Jalal gets medical attention. The wound in his toe, painful reminder of the torture at the hands of the law enforcing agencies that has been nagging with sores because he is diabetic and may turn into something worse, gangrene. Jalal was asked to cooperate with a few shady characters in the anti-corruption agency. These people had located a dormant account in a bank with a large balance. With a view to grabbing it, sought Jalal's assistance since he worked at the central bank. Jalal tried to make it clear that as a member of staff of the central bank, he had no access to any account in a bank, not to speak of operating it. The goons wouldn't believe, and after some intimidation to which Jalal didn't succumb, took him for interrogation in an outfit which by then had achieved notoriety of exercising torture. Eventually, he landed up here in Rupsha. In this convoluted world where fiction and reality coexist, I have to find out ways. There must be some to help Jalal, or else he might develop gangrene and amputation would be the only choice. Kashem, a bearded, nondescript person, slightly hunched, 50 or so years old, came to work as a faltu in our cell. He sweeps the floor quietly, as if being noiseless is part of his compliance with the rigors of incarceration. Kashem ran a thatched shop selling tea, cheap biscuits, pan, and cigarettes, and tucked along the boundary walls of BRTA, the office that deals with registration of vehicles and issuance of driver's license, notorious for corruption. According to Kashem, one day, the law enforcers, with a messianic zeal to eliminate corruption, swooped on his tea shop and found a few drivers, license hurriedly left behind by the guests, seeing the men in uniform. His shop could well have been a transit point in the circle of corrupt practices. But Kashim was only a cog in the wheel at worst. With all others gone, it was Kashim's turn to do the answering. But the anti-corruption guys could not go away empty-handed, could they? Kashim was arrested, not given a chance to pass on the news to his family. After a search that lasted weeks, the family finally located him in the Central Jail. A fast-track trial at the special tribunal set up for speedy dispensation of justice convicted Kashim, sentencing him to 7 years of rigorous imprisonment. His conviction touted as a major step toward eliminating corruption in BRTA. I asked Kashim whether he planned to appeal. No, he has too few resources to fight it out in court. His family has gone to his village home and hopefully will eke out a living there. Resigned to his fate, Kashim sees this episode as his destiny, Kismet. What is destiny? I guess this question must have been with us since the dawn of our existence. But did we find an answer? I have read explanation that runs through whole range, scientific to religious interpretation, a well-argued point of view, futurologists, experts who make a living predicting the future, is that all our present actions, individual and collective, are determined by the past events, and by extension of the same logic, it is here and now that the future is being made, a continuum of events and a vast algorithm driving the universal system. Much as I find this approach interesting and even to some extent convincing, such a worldview leaves no scope for individual freedom. A predetermined universe unfolding with order and occasional eccentricity. But where does this eccentricity then fit in? Kashim's plight is one such irrational twist, which otherwise has no relevance to any bigger story. A recently published book, The Black Swan, by Professor Nassim Taleb, was another interpretation of events, even history. The most unlikely event, according to him, weighs heavily on our personal and collective lives, which the writer metaphorically termed as the Black Swan. Such events has changed the course of history more than the orderly unfurling narratives. In otherwise innocuous incidents, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand along with his wife on July 28, 1914 in Sarajevo, Bosnia, sparked the outbreak of First World War that cost tens of millions of lives and untold miseries. Then, where is the mea culpa? This brings me to a statistical concept called degrees of freedom. Although I haven't quite understood the underlying abstraction, it conveys freedom in degrees, which seems to make sense. There is nothing called unbounded freedom or total predetermination. We live in a bounded circle with some choices to make. Most religions possibly take this position. But then did Kashim have a choice? What is his kismet? My arguments seem to have come to full circle. We have a common friend, a kitten whom I adopted first when I discovered her in my morning walk. Named her Skitty after the first kitten in our family. Almost a decade back, Skitty, Mridula's pet, had to be done away with the mercy killing on doctor's advice, since she was groaning with a terrible pain from infection. We buried her under the shade of a tree. Mridula, with tears rolling down her cheek, was the last to sprinkle water on her grave and bid farewell. I have been sharing my modest stock of powdered milk mixed with water with reincarnated Skitty in exchange for her friendship, which she gave unhesitantly. Other inmates soon took liking for her, and gradually Skitty became our communal pet, showered by all kinds of goodies by the cellmates in competition to curry her special favor. Skitty's loyalty has been unfailing. She has chosen me as her boss, sleeps on my bed, asks for food, and plays her natural games. Once in a while, she goes out visiting the neighborhood. Kitty has been sleeping under the cot all day. My small personal world is a cot, my suitcase stored underneath, a small table on the side. I have to write sitting on the cot, and partial claim on the string that runs across the room for hanging clothes. Skitty, possibly pregnant now, has chosen to sleep on top of my suitcase where my cigars, my lingering luxury, are stored. I have had to forego smoking after lunch quite a sacrifice, since I could not disturb her. Last night, Kitty jumped through the window and ran for cover when the guards burst into our cell like stormtroopers. In the early hours of the morning, for security check and SS apparition, our beds and other meager belongings were turned upside down. While silently we stood in line, I could not comprehend what they were looking for, other than humiliating us and driving home our status, lest we forget. The animal understood and ran for safety. Skitty returned later when it was all clear, while others joked that she was gone forever. Having known these guards only too well, Sanwar suggested that this could well be a plot for one of Humayun Ahmed's hugely popular novels. I keep my presence and claim in the outside world through letters to my family members, and at the same time share benign snippets of life within. A letter to Mridula. Dhaka Central Jail, 22nd February 2008. Dear Mridula, glad to see you come through the exam phase. Hope you have sorted out your relationship with the woman teacher you all were having problems with. Life here goes on. There are moments of exception though. Skitty comes over in the morning while I'm about to start my exercise. I serve her milk, which she quickly finishes and joins me, mostly sitting and idly watching me go past her. We are just about to start a genuine friendship. Increasingly, I have to play the role of big brother to other inmates, a shoulder to cry on, like someone who has taken to custody 30 days into his retirement. His college-going daughter and wife, now denied all official facilities, have to travel by bus from Chittagong to see him here. Or an engineer whose young girl appearing in SSC exam, thinking that she will have to find her match among one of the detainees' sons, and the story goes on. I have finished reading The Alchemist. Maktub. So often I have spoken to you about destiny. Human endeavor and destiny are two strange bedfellows, handmaiden of each other, driving and unfolding everyone's story of life, each one interesting, fascinating, and unique. Today is all we have. Herein lie yesterdays and tomorrows. Maktub. See you all tomorrow. Say hi to all your friends. Keep well and be happy. Lots of love. Abba. 28th February is a sad day. Rafiq, one of our cellmates, told us that his son was getting married at Rifle Square in a restaurant with a small group of close relatives, a date that had been fixed months back when none in the wildest dream thought of such force majeure, his son, a computer science graduate, and the girl, an internee doctor. We made plans to celebrate in the evening, coinciding with the actual ceremony of the restaurant, a party with chocolate cake and biryani. Jahangir volunteered to pull it through by getting the menu delivered from outside just in time. Relying on his long experience and ability to manage the jail staff, we felt assured. But his enthusiasm based on many underhand deals ran into trouble with the jail guards while he was trying on our behalf to negotiate the order with PC staff to deal with the petty cash of inmates deposited with them, through whom he wanted to get the orders paid for and delivered. Nothing is certain, particularly when one attempts to go beyond the strict rules, unless, of course, enough homework is done before. Jahangir had taken too many steps for granted. So we settled for a more symbolic early celebration with 2 small cakes and RC cola from the bakery inside after Maghrib prayers. We had to make it look like party though. A few of us spoke wishing the new couple all the best from afar. It was Rafiq's turn. We had overlooked the pain and disappointment in him. A few choked words and he stopped. Here, as I write at 8 p.m., guests must be arriving at the restaurant, dressed for the occasion, yet void of emotions and joy, but affirming once again the strength of fledgling human bonding, defeating the malice of evil forces. Hope springs eternal. This day too shall come to an end. Rafiq promised us a real dinner in better times. The other day, after a short court appearance, Sheikh Hasina did not turn up. Duli gave me a marigold from our rooftop garden as a memento of spring and also, I guess, to enliven me. For a brief moment, I floated back to my known world, tucked away, endearing in the closet of my heart. But Dhaka had no time for leftovers like us. On the journey back to prison at Art College, I caught glimpses of spring come alive, celebrations along the florist's bazaar, on the sidewalks of the wide boulevard, with splashes of colors, mostly yellow, strings of marigolds hanging like the braided, matted hair of Shiva, young girls dressed in yellow saris, subtle folk designs on their cheeks, strings of flowers around their neck, on their khopas, swinging as they walked with friends and lovers, mela of apsaras, voices and music blended in symphony, a fairy tale world etched in the vast metropolis. World apart, watching from a prison van, I looked for Mridula in the crowd of students, seeking a part of me in freedom. Our prison van passed through this world of love and romance without being noticed by anyone, as if it didn't exist. It was heart-wrenching feeling to be outcast from the society. The van slipped past toward its destination. This was like a journey after death, in a time machine from another planet, riding an invisible van to land where only the young lived. They neither saw the van nor heard the hoots, while I could hear and see, but could not reach nor communicate, my hands far removed, my voice not loud enough. I wish them well, all the romance and bonds that holds them together in a world of uncertainties that lie ahead, unknown and unaware, that once was ours too, in a life consummating death, a silent resurrection. Back in my cell, as night sets in the vast swath of silence, my mind floats. One story, maybe part of lore, comes to my mind for good reasons. It goes like this. Over 4 centuries ago, this city of Dhaka, and more so the surroundings of the prison, hosted the fabled fencing fight, a deadly one, over a woman, and the romantic Mughals were born. Meherunnesa, born to a Persian nobility in search of fortune, on a journey from Kandahar to Agra, the capital of the Mughal Emperor Akbar, grew into a legendary beauty and an accomplished young lady, noticed in the court of the emperor. She was married off at the age of 17 to a Persian fortune hunter whose valor made him a general in Mughal army and earned him the title Sher Afghan by Emperor Akbar. The couple was sent off to Bengal, the far-flung province of empire, away for the royal court, at the behest of General Man Singh, the most powerful man next to Emperor Akbar, and working as a regent to the crown prince Jahangir. Sensing first signs of fledgling romance for the Persian beauty, Man Singh wanted Jahangir to focus on the expedition to Deccan, the southern India, which had not yet come under Mughal domain, and sent Meher out of sight to Bengal so that the crown prince could concentrate on the more pressing royal demands. But then, far off from the Mughal capital, Meher could not avoid the prying eyes of another general, Kutubuddin, whose mother was the wet nurse of Jahangir. Kutubuddin picked up a row with Sher Afghan and challenged him to a duel here in Dhaka, in the jungle that is now the Central Jail. On a moonlit night, torches lighting the cleared space in the forest, an eerie ambience, the two charged at each other with flashing fences. There was no winner, and both lay dead. Meher became a widow before she even entered her fiery youth. This part of Dhaka was a silent witness to this tragedy, its earth made moist with the blood of 2 great warriors, and the tears of a woman who was born far away in Persia, whose parents traveled the hostile swath of land to reach the splendor of India. The rest is history. Meher went back to Agra to her parents, led the secluded life of a widow, withdrawn, pensive, hanging onto the memories of Sher Afghan. Jahangir had not forgotten his first love in the midst of the bloody campaign in southern India. After 13 years, he was still yearning for the hand of Meher. Time, the great healer, and romance, the great savior, came together to bring Meher back to life and the legend she was to be. The barrier that death brought between them dissolved one spring morning in Agra, and they were joined in love. Thus was born out of Meher, Noor Jahan, the light of the world. Noor Jahan, Noor
জাহান সিন্ধু নদীতে ভেসে এলে মেঘলা মোতির দেশে ইরানি গুলিস্তান.
The spring moon shines brightly. She is a silent spectator to all the happenings down on earth since the time immemorial, floating merrily in her abode in the sky in rhythmic waxing and waning, lost in the narcissistic love of her own serene beauty. I am fond of the mythology and lore about her, crafted by men over millennia. They make her more of human, a part of us. We hear the voice of despaired soul. কোথায় জ্যোৎস্না পুলকিত রাত, কোথায় পুষ্পরথ? Where is the night, enthralled in the embrace of the moon? Where are the chariots of flowers? Written by poet Jasimuddin. But then, science wants to take away our treasure chests of love and loss. It tells us that our solar system, moon riding piggyback on Earth, not even a speck in the vast universe, is making the final ordained journey, sneaking through the cosmic storms of the Titans. This scientific, anarchist, prosaic view makes everything meaningless and insignificant. No, I can feel the tranquil touch of the moon, a mother's consolation to a distraught son, affection that cannot be robbed. Beyond the ambit of science, there are elements in the universe, in abundance, that belong to all of us, under all circumstances. They are for us to find, grab, and be happy.